Welcome. I am the Moonshine King, and welcome to the fourth part in my Batman Year 1 comic book review. Today, I will be reviewing Chapter 4, which is titled Friend in Need, and I will be giving my overall final thoughts on the graphic novel as a whole at the end of the video. I hope you stay with me. Make sure you watch my playlist, which will be in the card above, so you are up to date and have seen my thoughts on chapters 1 to 3. The tagline for this chapter is, he's out to clean up city, likes being dirty, he can't do it alone. So, this is really a lead on from the end of the last chapter, where Batman was reflecting on how badly he messed up, and that he will need an ally in James Gordon on his side. That Gordon had many conflicts of his own, his affair with Detective SN on his pregnant wife, his conflict over Batman, and his conflict about the Commissioner and the killer cops. We are now on September the 2nd. Gordon and SN are looking quite grieved with the situation. SN wants to give back a bracelet he gave her, but he insists she keeps it, and she asked if his wife wasn't pregnant, would he... Well, the question isn't finished, but it's obvious that she was going to ask would he have left his wife to be with her. But we don't hear the answer to that because she apologizes, and then it cuts away to a news report that Gordon has apprehended a notorious narcotic dealer. He was described as a big fish, so clearly Gordon is doing very well in hunting down these big criminals. And as we know, these big criminals have been seen to be linked to the police, so this might bring up a bit more conflict there. They may feel provoked further. September 7th. Gordon and SN are in the office. This is known as kissy time for you. We read Gordon's thoughts, and he tells us that SN has requested a transfer, and because he's in love with her, this is the right thing to do. And we see a nice image of Gordon's wife on his desk there, just casually observing. September the 10th. Gordon is frustrated that Hard has allowed this narcotics dealer to be granted bail, and that Harvey isn't giving anything away clearly. On September 11th, we see Batman crawling on the wall like Spider-Man. Our bats known for crawling up walls, I wonder. Possibly the cave walls, I'm not sure. This dealer is pretty relaxed about the whole situation, but his lawyer still seems very concerned. But he is not worried because he knows information about Flass, and Flass knows information about the Commissioner, so he knows they can't come for him. But she reminds him that if he says one word about Flass, then they'll both be killed. She then advises him on some inquest, telling him what to wear and to smile nice at the jury. She also mentions that it's bad enough that he is black. So there is some racial discrimination in Gotham also, which is probably actually the least of its problems, which is very crazy for you. But when she leaves, Batman comes crashing in and terrifies the poor dealer. And here is, I think, perhaps my favorite dialogue in this entire story. You can never escape me. Bullets don't harm me. Nothing harms me. But I know pain. I know pain. Sometimes I share it with someone like you. And as you see, a terrified eye with its red pupil, and then it goes black. The next we see of this criminal, he has been fished out of Gotham's river, covered in slime and seaweed, and bat-like bite marks all over him, lifeless and cold.
Joking.
The next day, this crime lord just goes in to see Gordon and tells him he wants to talk about Flass. Then there is a news report telling us that Detective Flass has been implicated in the gangster's drug operation. So, mission accomplished for Batman, who must have threatened him into dear submission. September 13th. Gordon is being told off by the Commissioner for not informing him that his friend Flass was going to be implicated. And he stresses like he did when we first met Gordon and Flass and the Commissioner, the importance of friendship and loyalty. Gordon insists that he is just doing his best work. And the Commissioner acknowledges that he gets good press, that they like him, but they don't know him the way they do. And then he puts in front of Gordon a photograph of his kissy time with Detective SN and threatens to take it to the press and his wife. And of course, Jim is aghast. Look at those unnaturally blood-red eyes. Zombification for you. September 25th, Gordon and his wife are paying a visit to Bruce Wayne's manor. And Bruce already knows that he came to talk about Batman, and that he suspected him of being him. Bruce is acting like a typical playboy, with some lady on the couch with him to the disapproval of Gordon's wife. And Gordon says he needs to know where he was on the following dates. And then it cuts away. Just the same as it did when Gordon asked the same exact thing to Harvey Dent in Chapter 2. So, Gordon and his wife are driving in the car, and he's calling him a pig. Calling Bruce a pig. Now, in my previous reviews of the previous chapters, I called Detective SN a Mary Sue for instantly working out everything. But now that she is out of the picture, that torch has been passed on to Gordon, and he suddenly turned into a Toby Tom, or whatever the male equivalent is for a Mary Sue, because he instantly realizes there is acting like a pig, but any man who'd wear a cape and hunt criminals might go pretty far to keep his secrets. So he recognizes right away that this could be all just an act by Bruce Wayne. Already knows that he might have two completely different alter egos, and that his typical confident playboy image is all just possibly a ruse in order to avoid suspicion. But he feels the sudden need to tell Barbara the truth about his affair. And in this conversation, must have taken about 10 minutes, that's how long the car was stopped for, as Bruce Wayne notes, looking out his window. And we get another Superman reference when Bruce asked Alfred how he liked his performance, thereby confirming that this isn't Bruce's true nature after all, but Alfred said he supposes he will take up flying next, like that fellow in Metropolis. I'm not sure how long Superman has been around in this timeline, if he only recently appeared like a Batman, or if he's a veteran of sorts, if he's been around a long time. People in Gotham are certainly familiar with him, so that would be my guess for you. I wonder what happened to the woman he was with. Is she still lying down on the couch listening to all this? Because she would have heard the reason Gordon was there, and surely she would have been suspicious about what Bruce had to hide if you are being paid to be there. She might have been able to work out that he was a Batman if he wasn't careful. October the 2nd. Flass is being interviewed by police. I think this might have been Harvey Dent with Gordon, saying that the crime boss told them where, when and how much money he received, and that he's been spending more than he's been earning. Very suspicious to them. And here comes another of my favorite line. This Gordon saying he is facing 10 years in prison. Flass says that if Skeevers is as alive to testify. Skeevers is the name of this dealer. And then his lawyer quickly interjects, "My client didn't mean that." I found this quite humorous for you. October the 5th, and we see a very depressed looking wife being bothered by someone, asking if she knows about Gordon's affair. This could be news reporters, or perhaps one of the guys who works for the commissioner, or perhaps the commissioner himself, who can say to you. October 7th, we see that the dealer who went to Gordon with information about Flass has ingested rat poison. Someone tried to kill him, but he has been saved, and he still says he's going to testify. Well, Batman must have been very scary to him to keep him persistent. And Gordon asks Dent what is so funny. So I think this might imply that Dent is aware that Batman had gone after this dealer and threatened him. Seems like he knows something Gordon doesn't. October 12th. Gordon has a baby boy, and his wife is fine. Now, this was quite confusing to me, because I expected him to not have a boy, and for his wife not to be fine. Now, I don't know the specifics of this history, but I am aware Gordon does have a daughter who becomes Batgirl, who is named Barbara after her mother. And I'm pretty sure there was no mother around while Barbara was growing up. In The Killing Joke, for instance, there is no sign of her, as I recall, so I assume that the mother had died. And I have no recollection of Gordon ever having a son. Furthermore, it would have provided some obvious conflict if it had actually been a girl, as we know that Gordon very much didn't want to have a girl. So I do think regardless it was an obvious missed opportunity for conflict there for Gordon. November the 2nd, Selina has been up to no good at all. Thieving, burglary. She stole from Loeb, and he was quick to blame Batman, to which Selina takes great offense. Confusing the public, I see. They might think he is just a thief now. Very sneaky to you. Flass in other news is facing indictment after all on drug charges. And then Selina decides to go to steal from Falcone. Meanwhile, Batman has also gone to Falcone's place to listen in on any criminal plans he might be having. And as he was just about to tell his nephew his evil scheme, and Batman would have heard it from his secret hiding spot, except Catwoman shows up and makes a scene, so he barely starts to explain. Falcone immediately thinks she works for Batman. Very understandable, I would say. But before Falcone's nephew can sort her out, they get knocked out by Batman's batarangs, who then goes off in a huff because Catwoman wasted his time. I found it odd he didn't think to investigate this masked person who just interfered with his mission. He doesn't think to go down there and talk to her, find out who she is, what she wanted with Falcone. Nope, he just goes off. In fact, they never even meet at all, so... Well, except for that fight at the beginning, when she wasn't in her costume yet, and neither was he. November the 3rd, the next day. Alfred is cynically describing an article in the newspaper which concerns the lack of sleep among the marginally insane. And Bruce is actually quite snappy, blunt with Alfred. He tells him, "Quiet, Alfred!" which I haven't actually seen before, even in the comics I've read previously. Anyway, Bruce is frustrated because that woman, as he describes her, distracted Falcone from telling his plans, and now he's trying to work out what he was trying to say from the little recording he got. And Alfred is seemingly paying no notice, carrying on his reading. Marked increase in paranoia. So, certainly teasing his situation, it appears. Teasing Bruce. Bruce has very violent thoughts, you can tell, where he says he should have crippled Falcone's nephew so that he couldn't carry out the plan. And that made me think, actually, why it made even less sense why he just sulked off after Selina Kyle came onto the scene. Why didn't he interrogate the Roman, Falcone and his nephew? Okay, they were kinda knocked out at that minute, but I'm sure he could have taken them, and they might have woken up dangling from a rooftop or something. I mean, he terrified that drug lord earlier into testifying, even though it put his life at risk. And he did, in fact, almost die, and yet he didn't even attempt here to question or threaten or interrogate these guys. Even if Falcone didn't snap, I'm sure his nephew would have. And Alfred, still not paying any attention, just subtly mocking him, stating violent behavior as another symptom of a lack of sleep. But somehow Bruce works out what they're intending. Because of the words that he said, he wanted to avoid more bad publicity. Therefore he won't murder anyone. Falcone, that is. So he goes off and Alfred asks if he should fetch his tights. So the art's just tights after all. Unless Alfred is just continuing to mock him, of course, which would make sense. But to be honest, they do look just like tights. But he reminds him he never dresses as Batman during the day. But it makes me wonder, what if something very dangerous and criminal was going on during the day? A situation that desperately needed a superhero such as Batman involved. Would he just be like, sorry, not my problem, I'm not on shift? We know Superman is in this timeline at present, so maybe there are other crime-fighting vigilantes in Gotham, although we've never really gotten a sense that there were any others, either through news reports, or the Commissioner, or the criminals such as Falcone talking, or through Detective Gordon's investigations. So it doesn't seem feasible that there are any others at this time. Yet, this seems to be the one place in the world that desperately needs it. Wouldn't you? Meanwhile, Selina Kyle gets just one frame, where she's again listening to the news, where they are reporting Batman has been connected to a string of cat burglaries, and that there was a woman with claws who they think is Batman's assistant. And again, Selina is very pissed off because of this, promising to do something really nasty next time, presumably so that they separate her from Batman and see her as her own force. But I don't really understand her intentions here, to be honest. She wants to be nasty just because they think she works for Batman. Why does she even want the attention? Isn't a burglar supposed to be discreet? Why did she resort to this anyway? Can't she find any other decent work? If not, why not raise some money from the things she's already stolen and just get out of Gotham? Why is anybody even staying in Gotham at this point? Then we see the Roman on what looks like a hospital bed with bandages on his face, and he's telling his nephew his plan. We see him say that once a man becomes a father, he is never truly free. And as we know, Gordon recently became a father, so this doesn't bode well for him. Speaking of which, it is feeding time for Jimmy's Bobby, But as he's warming up the milk, he gets a call from the commissioner asking him to come in. And as you can see from the receiver, there is very subtle foreshadowing of Disney's inevitable soon-to-be takeover of DC and all else entertainment related on this planet.
We see the creepy commissioner tell someone that Gordon is leaving his apartment and to tell the Roman. Very sneaky people to me, very corruptive to you. But while Gordon moans that he's only had 2 hours sleep, a motorbike with a guy on it whizzes by him and goes into his garage. But he doesn't recognize him. Well, of course you're not going to recognize him if he's wearing a helmet. How do you know it's not a girl? You are very assuming to you. But anyway, he begins to fear, and so he immediately whizzes back around to get back to Jums and Barbara, who might be in danger. When he gets to the garage, the Roman's nephew has Gordon's son in the car, with a knife, but more worryingly, a big fat hand over the baby's mouth. How disgusting for you! Smelly breath to me. Also, Barbara is being manhandled. A bit of a pickle. Jim knows he cannot let them take his son and his wife. They will end up dead. Now, wait a minute here. Maybe Bruce Wayne isn't such a good detective as he thinks, because he was clearly under the impression that they wouldn't want to murder anybody. Or maybe it is Gordon who isn't as good a detective as he thinks. Maybe there is no intention to harm them, just perhaps to hold them as blackmail. A guarantee, you might say. After all, the nephew just tells Gordon to go to the office and wait there for their call. Still very fishy for you. But wait a minute. Is this supposed to be the Roman's idea of no bad publicity? Kidnapping the press's favorite hero, Cop's newborn baby and his wife? I think he would have been better off just murdering them, to be honest. I mean, not exactly low-key, is it? Do they think nobody would believe Gordon if he went to the press? Seems unlikely to me. Unless they're just counting on him not saying anything at all now that they have his family, but still, having 2 hostages must be a complicated endeavor for sure, especially when the commissioner of police is responsible. He fires at the guys. Not sure if he kills one of the guys. Gordon says to himself he can't go for a wound, so assuming he shoots to kill, but then says he got him in the shoulder, so... Do you die if you get shot in the shoulder? I wouldn't know, wouldn't you? The other 2 scram off in the car, taking the baby with them. Gordon hears a motorbike start behind him and shoots the guy who he saw earlier speeding past him. So he gives chase, of course, taking the motorcyclist's motorcycle. He tells Barbara to get away and to call a cop. But in this frame, it looks like there's already a cop there. Who is this guy? And this dude on a normal bicycle just popped up also. I think possibly this dude with the cap might be a ticket man or something. Actually, possibly a postman. Those, I think, surely are supposed to be letters, I think, now. And the guy who had been on the motorcycle removes his helmet. And here's the reveal. Barbara warns him not to move or she'll shoot, but he tells her she has to trust him and that he won't let her boy die. And here's the reveal, for it is Bruce Wayne. Very sneaky guy to me. Wait a minute for you. Why is he only revealing now, when he was in there before Gordon even turned around? Remember, he was ahead of Gordon, so what was he doing this whole time? Was he just hiding in the back while those guys kidnapped the baby and the wife?
Very irresponsible of Bruce Wayne. He just let them drive off. What if Gordon didn't come back around? Would it have been any different for you? I wonder. It's possible he was wary of revealing his identity, but he was wearing a motorcycle helmet, so it's not like they would see his face. Very tragic to me. I don't understand. But anyway, for you, you are very creepy to me. Now, I know it shows his face and eyes completely in shadow, but surely Barbara would have recognized his face at this point, or his voice even. First of all, it's all a bit convenient that his face is completely in shadow, isn't it? Does Batman control the shadows too? He should be Shadow Man for you. But you might argue either way that Barbara was totally shook with the situation, trembling and all that. And it probably would have happened all very fast also, so perhaps it mightn't have registered. So Bruce steals this random guy's bicycle and gives chase. Very convenient to him. And Gordon meanwhile shoots the tire of the car and it crashes on this bridge. The driver is knocked out, but the nephew, I don't even know if he has a name in this. He gets out with the babi and the knife. Gordon gets his gun knocked out his hand, and so they have a scuffle. I don't know how this guy is holding onto the babi with just one hand over his poor mouth, but look at this extraordinary scene. The giant guy is pushing Gordon back against the railing, and then the babi drops off the bridge. Very gruesome for you. However, somehow Bruce Wayne managed to jump up from his bike and fly onto the top of the bridge. I mean, is flight another one of his amazing powers? Just look at him go. He's even in a Superman pose, reaching for the sky. Now, flight would make sense since he's a bat, but he's not even in his costume. And it's not like he has superpowers, is it? Officially, supposedly. But anyway, he then free falls all the way down and catches the babi. Barbara somehow got there in time to see them all fall and show her horror. A very miraculous savior is he, and he serves the babi, as you can see here, presenting him to a very relieved Gordon. How is he alive to you? The evil nephew is knocked out, but somehow Gordon is okay. Maybe the evil nephew provided a very good cushion to land on. Very lucky he is fatty to you. Otherwise, I have no explanation for you, unless of course we have armor on, like he assumes Bruce is wearing. Of course he's not supposed to know that it is Bruce, but I think here it is implied in this scenario that the rescuer must be the Batman. He claims that he is practically blind without his glasses, says Gordon. But I think this just symbolizes a silent agreement between the two of them. I don't think he is blind at all, and he knows perfectly well that it is Bruce Wayne standing in front of him. But he is acting like he is unaware, therefore keeping the secret for him, and recognizing him as a hero, and not somebody who should be hunted down by the police. So, the implication here is that Gordon certainly did know Bruce Wayne was Batman from the very beginning, which I don't think makes a whole lot of sense if you consider that this was supposed to be canon. And other stories don't really fit in well with that idea. Night Quest and Night's End, for instance, which I have read. And I don't really like the idea. I think Gordon finding out Batman's identity should be its whole epic saga of its own, taking place years and years after Batman has been on the scene. However, in this scene itself, I do actually like the symbolic nod Gordon gives Bruce Wayne and his warning to leave because he hears the sirens coming, despite the fact it was actually he who saved the day. On the last page of this comic, we see that Flass had kept notes
of talks he had with Commissioner Loeb, and although Loeb isn't likely to go to jail due to some Judge Norton being put on the case, I am guessing he is very fishy to you. The word is that he is going to resign. December the 3rd, the last date in the story. Gordon is stood on the roof of a building waiting for the Batman. There does seem to be a light, but I don't think it's the bat signal, unfortunately. I don't believe it's been put in place yet, but this possibly is the roof of the police headquarters, but that is not clarified for you. We're told the person set to replace Loeb is apparently even worse. So a great success for all involved. Falcone and his sister are having a feud after he tried to kill his nephew. I'm assuming for failing in his mission to kidnap Gordon's family. But wouldn't the nephew have been arrested? Unless this assassination attempt took place in jail or something. And anyway, how did he survive that fall off the bridge? We might assume Gordon had body armor, and we're told Batman does. Even with that, it's still quite remarkable, I would say. But then are we to assume this nephew also had protection? That is quite some foresight, I would tell you. But he's very precautionary. But I guess we're not told what exact state he was in after. After the fall, maybe he broke all his bones in his body. Who could tell you? Gordon has been promoted to captain. Now, I would say I would have preferred if he had been the one to be promoted to commissioner in the place of Loeb. I think that would have been a lot more satisfying an arc to James's story, and it's obviously how we are most familiar with his role. I'm not sure who decides who is the next commissioner in Gotham. Maybe those in power still have a grudge against Gordon, but surely the pressure of the press, who seemed to be in favor of Gordon, might have counted for something. Detective SN is in New York, and Barbara and Gordon are taking marriage counseling. Thinking about it, I suspect it might be the mayor who decides on commissioner, and we know he's very dodgy for you. But the comic ends by telling us that someone has threatened to poison the Gotham Reservoir. He calls himself the Juku. So that is the reason he has called Batman to help. This reminds me of Batman Begins, but ironically it was the League of Shadows poisoning Gotham's water supply, and at the end there is the same situation. Gordon has called Batman to help with a new villain who calls himself the Joker. Inspiration for you! And finally, this brings us to the end of Batman Year 1. One of the most iconic, one of the most mentioned, one of the most praised. But who cares what a toffee pudding for you? What I think matters above all is what the Armenians tell me. So what were my overall thoughts? And here's the reveal. First of all, it isn't really a whole lot of fun thinking about it. I enjoyed the read. I wouldn't call it boring, but I think I found it a bit bland overall. I would have liked more action in the story. There wasn't really a whole lot of Batman actually, and what we did see of him I don't think was very thrilling perhaps. There were moments, such as when he sabotages the mayor's mansion party, and when he threatens that dealer to make him testify. These chilling moments is what I liked most about Batman's portrayal in this, more than the sequence where it's just a load of guys shooting at him point blank and somehow missing. Brandon's kill squad sequence was the main action piece and the only big one really in this. It wasn't highly imaginative and looked a bit awkward at times, but of course you got to applaud the Bats coming in at the end to save the day. I think my biggest disappointment with this story was to do with my expectation going in. I didn't know anything about this other than it is an origin story, and therefore I expected more content to do with Batman's training.
The origin doesn't paint the full picture, really. It starts with Bruce Wayne arriving back in Gotham, and the only flashback is when his parents died. So there's quite a long gap between that and where he is at in this comic. We don't learn where he's been all of these years, or who he's been with, and what martial arts style he's been learning, what mental training he's had, if any. It's all just left rather blank, and I would have liked to have seen more of that stuff. See how and where he learned martial arts, who his teacher was, more about his learning process, his psychological training. So perhaps a misunderstanding from the title. I would have liked more flashbacks to do with his time abroad. Batman Begins comes to mind. I would have preferred that stuff as opposed to Jim Gordon's extramarital affairs. Maybe cut out some of Gordon's affair and baby problems and marriage counseling. I mean, the climax of this whole story was a Bobby being thrown off a bridge. You could argue the stakes couldn't possibly be higher, but it felt like there should have been more to it than that. It doesn't feel like a Batman-inspired conclusion. He is known for dealing with threats to Gotham at large, and the ending actually acknowledges something more akin to that. The Joker threatening the water supply, something very big and lethal to you. I know people will say this is just the beginning of Batman. He isn't yet who we know him to be, so it makes sense not to have the classic climatic finish, but there just seemed to be a lot of focus on Jim Gordon for some reason. I would have liked that to be reined in a little bit. Not that it wasn't particularly interesting at times, but like I said earlier, I feel his story could have been told in a separate comic that just focuses on him. Does Jim Gordon even have a comic series? Would be interesting to you. When it comes to Batman's origin story, I feel they could have left Jim's personal troubles out of it as much as possible, and limit it mainly to just his interactions with the Batman. Another problem I had was how the finger was pointed almost immediately to Bruce Wayne. First by this Detective SN. I'm not sure if he's meant to be some major character, but this comic is the first time I've ever encountered her in any medium, I believe. Is she supposed to be particularly clever? I know she and Gordon are detectives, but Batman's supposed to be the world's greatest detective, who keeps his identity secret for all those years from the world, when everybody and their great uncle would be eagerly intent on finding out his true nature, his true identity, and yet we have this random woman who figures it out right away, and then by the end just leaves and moves to another city anyway, because of her and Gordon's affair. I mean, what was the point of her, really? And it's also her reasoning that makes it worse. I mean, it's just the obvious stuff she points out. Bruce Wayne is the richest man in Gotham, therefore could afford all these gadgets, which still I maintain are not that unattainable. But because his parents were murdered as a child, he would therefore hold some grudge against the criminals. I mean, come on! As she even says, this is common knowledge. We don't even need to be a detective to find this out. So literally anybody in Gotham could just make that connection. Anyone could join these dots, which is why it doesn't make sense. And also, he can't be the only rich person in Gotham who has been a victim of crime at some point. Though you might argue they deserve it for wanting to hang around in Gotham. I'm guessing they don't hand out very accurate holiday brochures for this destination. Though I suppose all the rich dudes seem to be corrupt in this place, so perhaps it makes some sense to you. So there's that side of it, the practicality of them finding out. But there's also the side of it that it isn't very satisfying that they would know this easily, and have him figured out so easily. The reason why Batman worked is because his identity is a secret
because nobody would suspect Bruce Wayne. Very deceiving to you. Even the silent acknowledgement between Bruce and Gordon at the end. A silent oath, you could say. Though it is a nice moment, I do think it rather diminishes Batman's legacy. Since this was canon at the time, it doesn't really make a lot of sense either that Gordon would know who he is. In Night End, for instance, when Bruce gives the mantle to Jean-Paul Valley, who eventually goes a bit mad with his power and starts killing criminals, to the outrage of Gordon, he could have just gone up to Wayne Manor to demand answers, if not even to arrest Batman. Personally, the identity of Batman, I think, should be treated very cautiously. Treat it as a major plot point. Give it an entire series of its own, a whole story based around Gordon finding out the truth after many years of interacting and working alongside him. Not just tactlessly thrown into his origin story, where it's just all figured out like it was nothing at all for you. This, at the time, was heralded as a modern retelling, but reading it in 2018, it no longer feels that way. I mean, for a start, the look of a Batman, how they think his gadgets are so high-tech, when the most they've seen is a couple of batarangs, and later he has some rope, and some gas, and some darts. His utility belt is very iconic. I would have liked to have seen it actually utilized, not just immediately burnt up and made unusable as soon as the time came. It would have been very interesting to use, pops up. It would have been nice to have seen him in a laboratory, mixing together different substances, mixtures to put in his different weapons, and putting together and welding his gadgets. Maybe even creating the belt itself, or his cowl. A behind-the-scenes look at his preparation and his thinking. That was a very noticeable absence. Although it was mentioned when, and it shows a black hole when the bats came. But other than that, the Bat's Cave! Another iconic association with Batman, and we never see him actually in it. No Batcomputer, no piles of junk. Of course, as he only just got to Gotham, he wouldn't have all the villains' memorabilia. But that would have made a nice scene, even to see it rather empty, and Alfred mentioning how it will inevitably be filled up to the brim if you keep bringing these tokens back from your enemies. We didn't even see how he discovered the cave. We didn't see his first encounter with a bat. He mentions he was scared when he was young, but I think that would have fit really nicely with a creepy flashback or so. And of course, I have not forgotten, the Batmobile. Why was there no Batmobile? The most we got was Batman riding off on a stolen police bike, which he eventually abandoned, and I guess just walked the rest of the way. We didn't even get a line after, "I need to get a car," or something. So, no combat running, no secret identity, no utility belt that's actually utilized, no Batcave, no Batmobile, no cute grapple gun, no real supervillain. That's quite an accomplishment for you. Also, I'd like to have seen more of Alfred and Bruce's relationship, as Alfred is barely in this. He had one scene where he's mocking Bruce in his classic, cynical, disapproving manner, but their relationship isn't really explored much. What he means to Bruce, what Bruce means to him, why he's been trusted with knowing his greatest secret. Some emotional depth between them would have been nice. Although he still is a useless guardian, considering Bruce, I think, when he left Gotham was 13, and he came back when he was 25, so clearly there were some granddaddy issues at play here. Wasn't Alfred questioned by the authorities over the whereabouts of the child he is responsible for legally? Batman has no real noticeable fighting style or technique, it seems, just a bit clumsy and brutish. Falcone, I was wondering what happened to him at the end of all this. I think it tells us that the last time we saw of him, he was in the hospital after being clawed by the Catwoman. Speaking of which, what exactly was the point of her being in this? She just sort of disappeared by the end anyway, and she had no real contribution to the plot, and could have easily been left out entirely. Just another distraction from the telling of Batman's origin by throwing in another person's origin. This is 3 people's origin in this, at least. So, some of old Bruce Wayne would have been interesting. Some more of him. What does he get up to every day? The story takes place over a whole year, and we don't really get a sense of his life on a day-to-day basis. The most we see is when he's putting on that facade when Jim comes to visit him. Does he go to parties, public events? Does he support charities? Is he very hands-on with his family's business at Wayne Enterprises? That's another dimension that's been left out. Perhaps Bruce and Batman would have been a better team viewpoint story rather than Batman and Gordon. Although there is a nice parallel to that also. I like what they did in Batman Begins, using Lucius Fox as a bridge between Batman and Bruce Wayne and his company. Something like that could have been incorporated. The closest we get is the Bat summoning magic device from Wayne Electronics that he uses. Oh yes, and how could I forget? No Bat Signal. Most of what is iconically associated with Batman seems to have been sucked out in the story. It's not the first Batman comic I've read, and it is not my favorite, but it was still a good read. I recommend it to you, as all others do, for the fan of the Batman. This is a significant piece of this history, and I'm sure you will find something to enjoy in it. It appears to be a fan favorite after all, but they are very creepy to me. What about you? I'm going to end this video with a collection of some of my favorite panels on this series, and some which I thought were very dodgy to you. Less fashionable indeed. I noticed that sometimes they can be a great deal in people's faces, and other times there was the bare minimum. So the art wasn't really consistent at times, and they seemed to pick and choose when there should be lots of detail and when it should look very plain. There were many times when I thought I could copy and draw the characters just as good, and I'm not even an artist, but there were other times where it was very impressive, and sometimes the simplistic approach was used effectively. But what do you think of Batman Year One? I would be very interested to you. Have you read it before? Are you interested in reading it in the future? What do you think of my analysis? Tell me your thoughts. Show me your crimes. And remember, jump on that subscribe button if you would like to eat the cheese. Farewell, my munchins. Take care, my munchins.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.